Imagine a city so massive, so meticulously organized, and so culturally advanced that it dwarfed medieval London at its height. A city built along the fertile banks of the Mississippi River nearly 1,000 years before Columbus set foot in the Caribbean. A city that rose like an earthen crown above the heart of North America. A city with pyramids that touched the sky, great plazas that held thousands of people, astronomical observatories aligned with celestial precision, and a political hierarchy so complex that the first Europeans who heard the stories dismissed them as impossible. And yet this city existed. Its name was Cahokia. But somehow, almost no one in the modern world knows it ever stood. If you were to travel back in time to the year 1100 AD, the landscape before you would be almost unrecognizable. The modern highways, strip malls, and quiet suburbs of Illinois would vanish, replaced instead by an enormous urban center alive with movement. Tens of thousands of people, merchants, farmers, artisans, warriors, nobles, priests, astronomers, would be carrying out their daily lives. Smoke would rise from cooking fires. Drums would echo from temple platforms. The laughter of children would mix with the chants of religious ceremonies. And at the center of everything, towering above the plains, would stand a vast pyramid of earth. Monk's Mound. Monk's Mound was not a small hill or a symbolic gesture of architecture. It was a monumental undertaking, larger in mass than the Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed from millions upon millions of baskets of earth. Its sloping terraces rose nearly 10 stories into the sky, connected by a wide ceremonial staircase. At its summit stood an enormous wooden temple, the home of Cahokia's supreme ruler, a figure both political and divine. This was not the primitive wilderness described in so many old textbooks. This was not a land waiting to be discovered. This was a capital, a metropolis. A city whose population rivaled or exceeded that of Paris, London, and other major European centers of the same era. A place where the very ground had been shaped by human hands, not just for shelter, but for meaning. Cahokia was a deliberate design. Every mound, every plaza, every pathway aligned with celestial cycles. The city itself was a living cosmogram, a reflection of the Mississippian belief in a three-tiered universe of sky, earth, and underworld. To live in Cahokia was to inhabit a sacred landscape, one where the boundary between the human and the divine could be crossed through ritual, sacrifice, and ceremony. On the city's northern edge stood one of its most extraordinary structures, an architectural marvel known as Woodhenge. Imagine a massive circle of towering cedar posts, arranged with geometric precision. At first glance, it might resemble a simple ring, but at sunrise on key dates, the solstices, the equinoxes, the sunlight would pierce through specific gaps between the posts, illuminating the central plaza or the face of the main mound. Woodhenge was a calendar, a clock, a compass, and a ceremonial stage. Its creators tracked solar movements with such accuracy that modern astronomers have confirmed its alignments through mathematical analysis. This was not guesswork. This was science. Life in Cahokia thrived on agriculture, particularly the cultivation of maize, which allowed the population to grow to unprecedented levels. With food came trade, and with trade came wealth. Evidence from excavations shows that goods flowed through Cahokia from across the continent. Copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, mica from the Appalachian Mountains, obsidian from the west, pigments and minerals from distant lands. Traders navigated the Mississippi River system like highways, carrying not only goods, but ideas, rituals, artistic styles, and stories. Cahokia was not isolated. It was the beating heart of a vast cultural network we now call the Mississippian world. But beneath the surface of its prosperity lay a rigid social order. Cahokia was ruled by a sacred elite, individuals believed to be the earthly representatives of sky beings and cosmic forces. Their power was reinforced through elaborate ceremonies and through the use of mound-top temples where offerings and sometimes sacrifices were made to ensure balance between the realms of the universe. Some of the most haunting archaeological discoveries at Cahokia come from the burial mounds. In one known as Mound 72, excavators uncovered the remains of a high-status man placed upon a bed of thousands of shell beads arranged in the shape of a falcon, the symbol of the warrior elite. Surrounding him were the bodies of dozens of women, sacrificed to accompany him into the afterlife. Elsewhere were the remains of men with crushed skulls, likely war captives or ritual attendants. These were not simple burials. These were state ceremonies, expressions of ideology and power. Cahokia's rulers controlled not just life, but death. And yet, despite its vast population, its monumental architecture, its complex religious system, and its sprawling influence, Cahokia did not last. After reaching its peak between 1050 and 1200 AD, the city began to decline. The reasons remain mysterious, though many theories exist. Environmental stress from overexploitation of resources may have played a role. Deforestation, soil depletion, or climate variations that diminished crop yields. Flooding from the Mississippi River may have repeatedly devastated parts of the city. Internal political turmoil could have fractured the elite hierarchy. Perhaps warfare erupted between rival factions. Perhaps disease swept through dense neighborhoods. Or perhaps, as some scholars suggest, a profound religious crisis, something seen in the sky or felt in the earth, shook the foundations of the society itself. Whatever the cause, the decline was swift. Within a century, the great plazas grew quiet. The mounds stood empty. The temples collapsed. The city that once hummed with life was abandoned, its people dispersing into smaller communities across the region. By the time Europeans arrived, Cahokia had been gone for 200 years, its memory preserved only in the oral traditions of distant descendants. But the tragedy of Cahokia's disappearance is matched only by the tragedy of what happened next. When early European settlers encountered the silent mounds scattered across the Midwest, they refused to believe that indigenous people could have built them. They invented myths to fill the void, claims that Vikings or ancient Hebrews or a lost race of giants must have been responsible. Anything to avoid acknowledging that native civilizations had once achieved greatness. These myths persisted for generations, shaping academic thought and public imagination. Some mounds were destroyed to make room for farms, roads, and towns. Others were looted for curiosities. Entire landscapes were erased before they could be studied. Cahokia was not forgotten by accident. It was erased on purpose. Because acknowledging Cahokia meant rewriting the narrative of America. It meant confronting the uncomfortable truth that North America was never an untouched wilderness. It meant acknowledging that advanced cities, scientific knowledge, political complexity, and monumental architecture existed here long before the first Europeans set foot on the continent. It meant erasing the myth of discovery. Today, however, Cahokia is returning to the story. Archaeologists, indigenous historians, and researchers are piecing together its legacy. LiDAR imaging reveals the full extent of its urban layout. Soil studies uncover ancient agricultural practices. Artifact analysis paints a picture of a society both sophisticated and deeply spiritual. And slowly, inch by inch, mound by mound, the city re-emerges from silence. What we find is astonishing. Cahokia was one of the largest cities on Earth during its time. Its influence radiated across thousands of miles. Its people engineered landscapes, tracked the heavens, governed through complex hierarchies, and built monuments that still stand today, defying centuries of erosion. It was a civilization deserving of recognition, respect, and remembrance. Cahokia challenges the way we think about history. It challenges the idea that sophistication is born only in certain places, or among certain people, or under certain conditions. Cahokia proves that civilization can rise anywhere human ingenuity is allowed to flourish. It reminds us that the past is far richer, more diverse, and more surprising than we ever imagined. And maybe that is why its story feels so powerful today. Because if a city like Cahokia could exist and be forgotten, what else lies beneath our feet? What other chapters of the human story remain buried, waiting to be uncovered? What other truths have been hidden, dismissed, or rewritten to fit the narratives of those in power? Cahokia stands as a monument not only to the people who built it, but to the idea that history is vast, mysterious, and full of revelations still waiting to be unearthed. It demands that we look again, question again, imagine again. For 1,000 years before Columbus, a city larger than London stood on American soil. A city of earth and sky, of ritual and reason, of astronomy and empire. A city whose people shaped the land and aligned their lives with the movements of the cosmos. A city that thrived, collapsed, and was buried beneath centuries of silence, only to rise again in our time, not as a ruin, but as a revelation. Cahokia was not a myth. It was not a mystery. It was not an anomaly. It was a civilization. And now, after centuries of forgetting, we finally remember.